to be able to just make a choice on your own and just be able to speak for yourself.
This one's wife. Her use of Meglish. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Longer-standing viewers of my work know that there is a collection of videos all about narcissism, the different types of narcissist, different types of victim, the dynamic, the manipulations, lots of information about that, and that I have more recently focused on the analysis of famous and infamous people to extend the reach, and there is a sister channel, Narcissism and Psychopathy, with H.G. Tudor, which is in its early stages of growth, which focuses on more of the formal aspects of narcissism as opposed to the celebrity and fame elements of it. In creating this material, I have utilised, naturally, my own experiences given what I am, the observations that I've had over many years, conveying and distilling that information to help people understand about narcissism and psychopathy. I have utilised real-life examples of narcissists that aren't particularly famous to demonstrate aspects of their behaviour, and I regularly utilise videos, news reports, interviews, etc. to break down what's going on in relation to famous people. In some instances, I will take a concept that's relevant to the behaviour, for instance, of this one's wife, explaining why the relationship persists, for instance, why Harry hasn't yet gone. In other instances, I'll use a news article with regard to her latest activities and break down what's going on. I also receive suggestions from people as to aspects of narcissism and in relation to this one's wife, since she proves so popular, as to what you'd like me to talk about, and please do keep those coming in. As part of this, it's also very useful to observe what other people might be thinking, because that provides inspiration for breaking it down vis-a-vis narcissism. And there was a really interesting post on the Saint This One's Wife subreddit, which, as you know, they use her actual name and I do not. And I thought that makes an interesting point, something we've touched on before, but they've gone into greater detail. And I thought to myself, that is excellent, and that should be amplified to more people, so that not only do they see the sterling work of this poster, but it gives me an opportunity to then utilise what they've explained to show more about why she behaves this way and her narcissism in action. The poster is called Mickleborough, and they should receive due credit for the work that they've done, which I'm now going to utilise for the purposes of talking about this peculiarity of this one's wife and her use of what has been dubbed Meglish. Mickleborough writes, "I have an ever-increasing suspicion that this one's wife cannot speak English. To be precise, she can't use the language correctly. This is very strange for someone who rates communication so highly that it's included in her coat of arms, as exemplified by the white quills and songbird." Absolutely right. This one's wife thinks that she's a great communicator. Why? Because her narcissism tells her that she is. It's also the case that because of the innate superiority that is created by her narcissism, that she is elevated above everybody else, that she sees herself as having a ready-made platform whereby what she says is always important. This means that she doesn't actually exhibit any care about what she is saying, because, first of all, she's not that clever to begin with. Secondly, her narcissism tells her, whatever you say, it's brilliant. You could sit there and make a noise, and it would be of import. Indeed, if you'll remember, in the Cut interview, she started making some strange noises to the journalist. That demonstrates the level of self-absorption of this particular narcissist, that she thinks sitting making noises is an ineffective method of communication. Her arrogance is such that she thinks that whatever she has to say is important, and yet we've seen time and time again she speaks and doesn't actually say anything, and she plagiarizes sections of speeches and quotations from other people and passes them off as her own, part of her sense of entitlement, lack of boundary recognition and character trait acquisition. It certainly is strange, as Mickleborough points out, for her not to use the language correctly when she rates communication so highly. But this again is part of the deluded nature of this one's wife. When she speaks, she thinks people are in awe of what she says. She really does. When she issues a sentence, she'll pause because she thinks that there should be a tidal wave of applause. When she makes an observation, she makes an observation believing that she's the first person on planet Earth to have ever made that point. She is so caught up in her delusion that this means that she doesn't actually pay proper attention to what she's saying to realise that she uses words incorrectly, that she often spouts errant nonsense by way of word salad, and that she essentially isn't expressing herself correctly. Mickleborough goes on to state her misuse of English includes A. Not understanding connotation. Words may have the same meaning but can't necessarily be used interchangeably. B. An inability to express herself properly. She knows what she'd like to say, but it comes out mangled. C. Pig ignorant. That did make me chortle. As ever, which of course is the most recent manifestation of her nonsensical attempt for world domination. As ever, the latest piece of evidence, Mickleborough writes, is what looks to be her signature sign-off. She's used it before, along with more conventional closes such as with love. But what does it mean? According to the Cambridge English Dictionary, as ever means in the same way as always. It gives examples. As ever, I was the last to find out. As ever, his writing is lucid and witty. From the examples, it can be seen that as ever means as usual or as always. People sometimes close letters with always, with the connotation of always yours, always faithful, and so on. But can as ever be used synonymously? Like much of this one's wife's writing, it seems superficially all right, but it doesn't actually stand up to scrutiny. It just sounds odd. Mickleborough goes on to explain that American etiquette expert Emily Post, or rather her descendants, seem to think this is fine. As always or as ever is useful in closing a letter to someone with whom you may not be close or haven't seen for some time. Perhaps it's an American thing. As ever, England and America are two countries separated by a common language. Thus, Mickleborough is suggesting, and I agree, that the use of as ever isn't being used appropriately. Another example of how she doesn't use the language in the way that she ought to. You'll recall also from the cut interview, which I mentioned earlier, that she confused guttural and visceral. That she talked about it being a guttural experience, which has always entertained me, thinking, gosh, this was such a guttural experience. What? You were there going... that she gets those words confused. We also have an example, which I picked up on the time, as did many other people, in respect of how she mangles the English language when she undertook the impromptu speech, or at least so called, in Vancouver. Mickleborough produces the snippet explaining, she said as such, I need you to know how much it means to him and how much each of you mean to him. The Duchess told the crowd, you are his family, just as we are his family. And I hope you recognise how much of his heart he has poured into every single beat that has gotten all of you to this week that is going to be spectacular. That last sentence makes my ears hurt. And Mickleborough queries, do you understand the last sentence? I think she's trying to draw in concepts of putting one's heart into something heartfelt work and the poignancy of every beat of one's heart and coming up with an amazingly meaningless statement. It's incomprehensible. It doesn't make sense. But you see, what happens with this one's wife is that because there's nothing genuine about her, and she's not particularly articulate, and she's not bright, what happens is her narcissism tells her You are really intelligent. You are a brilliant speaker. You have really meaningful things to say. And therefore, she tries to live up to what her narcissism is telling her that she is, but she hasn't got the tools. So it's a little bit like saying to a young boy, "You're a brilliant footballer." So he attempts to go on a mazy dribble, falls over his own shoelaces, loses the ball, and the other team score. He's not up to it, and neither is she. Rather than understand that one of the keys to effective communication is to speak in terms that your audience will understand. Sure, you can expand their knowledge with the use of certain words here and there as long as it makes sense, words that they might not be familiar with, but you explain what that might mean or they'll go away and look it up. But with this one's wife, what she attempts to do is live up to the image that her narcissism creates for her, but she hasn't got the ability or the skills to do so. So what do you get? Sentences such as, "And I hope you recognise how much of his heart he has poured into every single beat that has gotten all of you to this week that is going to be spectacular." It doesn't make sense. It's garbled. The use of "gotten," really? It's a mess. But she does this frequently because she thinks that she's important. She thinks that she's brilliant because this is what the narcissism is causing her to believe. So she tries to live up to that image and she hasn't got the ability to do so. Rather than speak at a lower level and then not make these cock-ups, she tries to come across as something that she isn't, which of course we all know that's the embodiment of this one's wife. And thus she fails. Mickleborough picks out another example with the use of otherworldly. When this one's wife appeared at the Children's Hospital Los Angeles Gala on the 5th of October, when asked about the Children's Hospital, she had this to say: "Oh my goodness, the work they do at Children's Hospital LA is otherworldly. And I think from my standpoint as a mother, no one wants to be in a position where you need to go to a place like this. But if you have to, the best place in the world you could go would be Children's Hospital LA," she said. Now, Mickleborough points out many things can be said to be otherworldly. Absolutely the case. I.e. not of this world, for instance, taste or sensation. Because no one in this world knows for sure what the other worlds are like. Logically, only abstract concepts can be described as otherworldly. Whatever the Children's Hospital does, it must necessarily be of this world and not of another world. Once again, she uses words incorrectly. It also calls to mind her use of archetypes, when actually it was stereotypes. Of course, she wanted to get the arch bit in there, because again, she thought she was being clever, because of Archie and Arch well, and instead, she just makes herself look stupid. She said, in relation to her Archetypes podcast, which Mickleborough points out, "Thank you to all the supporters and fans of Archetypes who voted for us for this special People's Choice Award," this one's wife said in a statement on her Archwell site on Wednesday. "I loved digging my hands into the process, sitting up late at night in bed, working on the writing and creative. And I loved digging deep into meaningful conversation with my diverse and inspiring guests, laughing and learning with them and with each of you listening." Mickleborough quite properly points out, you can dig soil with your hands, you can dig your nails into the palms of your hand, but you can't dig a process with your hands. How can you, when a process is intangible? Excellent observations there from Mickleborough on the subreddit. And it's right to describe it as Meglish, because what she does is she takes the English language and she absolutely mangles it. She mangles it with her word salads. She mangles it with her excess verbiage. She mangles it with the misuse of words. Now, sometimes you might think, well, that could be down to nervousness. But it's not, because this one's wife has been in front of cameras all through her life, and she craves that. What it is simply her narcissism operating at a level that expects her and tells her that she's brilliant and a wordsmith and articulate, but in actual fact, as a not particularly clever individual who isn't particularly articulate, who also is deluded, it results in this disconnect between what her narcissism tells she is and what she tries to be and the tools that are available to her. And this is the result. a garbled mess of incorrectly used words, not used in the appropriate connotation, with an inability to express herself properly. My thanks to Mickleborough for pulling that together, which proved a very good basis for demonstrating another aspect of this one's wife, her deluded behaviour, and the disconnect between what her narcissism makes her think she is and what she actually is. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.